The live session for module 4. We have with us today Mr. Freddie Jumba from the International Development Institute of the International Network of Supreme Audit Institutions, known as INTERSCI. Freddie is a good friend of mine, and we renewed our friendship very recently by running into each other randomly at Brussels Airport and having a great chat. This was, I think, earlier in the year when I was on my way to Ghana. Try to remember where you were at the time. So Freddie, it's great. It's great to have you here. Wonderful. And Adams is joining us again as well. Adams, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us again. Your support and co-facilitation on the modules has been invaluable. So it's great to have you. Freddie, I'm going to just make a very brief overview of what was covered this week, and then we'll look forward to hearing from you. So this week we are looking at two phases of the budget cycle: the execution phase and the audit/oversight phase. The execution phase is something like the underdog of the budget cycle, in the sense that very few parliaments really spend or bother to spend a lot of time on the execution phase. You know, the execution phase starts as soon as Parliament approves the budget and we start into the new fiscal year. So when you start into your new calendar year, obviously this is when ministries have to start receiving the funds from the Ministry of Finance in order to be able to execute all of the programs that they are mandated to do as approved by Parliament in the budget. But as I said earlier, very few parliaments really spend a lot of time monitoring how spending is taking place in real time during the fiscal year. Mostly, we have an expression here in Canada. I don't know if you use this expression in your country, but we talk about the horse has already left the barn, right? So usually we wait until the horse has left the barn to see if there's been any problems with spending after the fact. And so it's really important to spend time for parliaments to spend time at the execution phase, reviewing monthly reports to see what spending has been like. Is spending meeting the targets for a particular program? So, for example, if 1 million CDs has been devoted towards gender-based violence, and 6 months into the program, only 100,000 CDs has been spent, that's a red flag that the government is not meeting the commitment that was allocated by Parliament. But there's also many other factors. We talked about supplementary budgets in the e-module. We also talked about monitoring of gender promises and the role that civil society can play in monitoring gender promises. That is, when the government makes promises or Parliament adopts the budget, whether these commitments are actually implemented. So there's all kinds of issues that we can look at. And next week, we're going to look at oversight of public debt. And so that's another issue that Parliament can be monitoring in real time, is to see whether the debt levels are increasing as a result of perhaps revenues are not meeting the targets, for example. So lots we can do on that phase. On the audit oversight phase, this is more of a traditional area that parliaments tend to focus on, as Freddie is going to tell us, especially, I would say, for parliaments that have the Westminster tradition, that are part of the British parliamentary system or have their traditions from the British parliamentary system. And here's where we see dedicated oversight committees. After the fiscal year is over, they're looking at the financial statements, or the audited financial statements, hopefully. They're looking at compliance, whether policies and programs that have been approved by Parliament have been executed as intended by Parliament. And they're also looking at value for money, which is what we call performance audit, to see whether programs have been implemented with due regard to economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. And in many parliaments, there is a dedicated public accounts committee that reviews the reports of the Supreme Audit Institution or the Auditor General. So a lot of these issues were covered already in module 4, but we're very fortunate to have Freddie with us, who has many years of experience working in the area of audit and oversight. Freddie, why don't we go to you and get you to maybe introduce yourself, talk a bit about your career, where you started, and maybe launch into a little bit of explanation about some of the issues that we talked about yesterday, which was your experience with public accounts committees, the audit process, how civil society organizations can get involved, et cetera, et cetera. How does that sound?
That sounds perfect, Jeff. Thank you very much, and good morning. I hope you can hear me and see me. As Jeff said, my name is Freddie Eve Njemba. I'm a citizen from Cameroon, and I currently live in Oslo, Norway, where I work for the Intosai Development Initiative. As you might be familiar or maybe not, the Intosai is the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions. And I think in each of your country, you have a Supreme Audit Institution, which can be called National Audit Office or Auditor General's Office. And basically, what we do here is to support audit officers in building their capacities in demonstrating results, professionalizing their workforce, and also creating impact. And one of the key area of work that we've been expanding over the last couple of years is how establishing partnerships between supreme audit institutions and other actors, including non-state actors, can be conducive to promoting transparency, accountability, and also good governance. And I think this is the context in which I would position this intervention. So if I maybe just provide a bit of element about myself, Jeff mentioned that we met, I think it was early February. We bumped into each other. And that was not the first time that we met. Actually, I was fortunate enough to, more than 10 years ago, to do a training program, intensive training program in Canada through the Canadian Accountability and Audit Foundation. And Jeff was one of my facilitators, especially in this whole area of external oversight and making sure that we're dealing well with Parliament. So I'm a performance auditor by training. And since I've moved to IDI, I'm working a lot in this area, not specifically on audit, but making sure that audit institutions engage significantly with their external stakeholders. So I could see that in the previous modules, you've touched upon the external oversight, the audit process, and also the whole budget process. And when I was discussing with Jeff, I was wondering, okay, what could be some of the elements that could be brought here, especially looking at the audience, making sure that it's also connecting to the different trends. We're thinking about citizen participation and how can we connect the dots. So introducing external audit or oversight, I would both focus on two aspects. The first aspect is the process, and the second aspect is the actors. And when we think about the process, we think about the process as public financial management. I think you've been already enlightened on the specific part. We have the planning and budgeting. We have the execution. Jeff was really mentioning the execution. And all of that has to be consolidated in specific documents, accounting documents, reporting documents that needs to be made available. But then there needs to be a possibility to check on those, to see if what was planned was actually implemented. And that's really that fourth part that is a link within the whole cycle, where you bring in this element of external scrutiny and audit, really this idea of having this oversight. And why do we think about having this oversight. I would have a question for you. Like, would you think that those who are actually implementing the budget should be the one actually checking how it was implemented? So that would be maybe just a question to you to get your perspective on that. Feel free to react. Okay. Yes, I can see that we have some can react in the chat. And then we can see why it's quite important to have an external party actually checking on that. So if there's any reaction on why should we, is it normal that those who are implementing the activities are also the one checking on how those activities are implemented? Do we have one or two keywords?
Great question. Let's see if we can get some reaction from the group. You're obviously very experienced presenter because you use the cardinal rule, which is to stop and consult the audience. Great idea. Great idea. So Freddie's question, I don't mean to interrupt, Freddie. I want to just support you. Freddie's question is, does it make sense to you that those that are implementing the budget are also checking to make sure that the budget has been spent properly? Freddie, did I get that right?
Yes.
Friends, what are your reactions? Okay.
Oh, I see. No. Okay. Now we get yes.
Thank you, Merada.
Yes, and it's in French. Merci beaucoup. Those implementing the budget shouldn't be those who check if it has been exactly. So I think we're getting we understand that you need a bit of objectivity when it comes to this type of function, and that's why you need external actors who are not part of the implementation. And those actors should be dedicated to checking whether this has been implemented properly. And that's how you can position the whole external oversight, scrutiny, and audit within the PF. Because obviously, you need some objectivity, and you need to make sure that you're able to give an independent opinion on whether this has been implemented as planned. And this can range or touch a wide array of issues. Yes, thank you. We're all in agreement on this. This can touch a range of issues, and we can think, okay, is it that we have built the schools that were budgeted? Have we provided the support that was needed through this specific program? We talked about, Jeff mentioned the gender aspects, like gender commitments. So you really need that external angle and that external eyes or that external scrutiny. So if you think about the PFM process, public financial management process, that's how you have to position this external scrutiny and audits. And as I said, there is another lens that is more about the actors who should play those specific roles. So my second question to you, now that we have established that those implementing shouldn't be the one checking, is the responsibility of checking should sit within a single institution, or is this that can be done by several institutions? So that would be my follow-up question, because now we'll get into the other part, which is the actors. We've already established that now we have dedicated part of the process, but who is supposed to implement that part of the process? Is it one institution, or can we have a wide array of actors who are there to check? Any thoughts? Yes. To have a fair balance, it is my opinion that more institutions should participate. Absolutely. And that's where you get into the area of collaboration, coordination, a lot, exactly, plusieurs institutions. You have this idea where you have to bring in relevant actors. And that's where we move into what we call the ecosystem, where you have a wide range of actors who are playing specific roles. And here I want to stress the relationship that you have between supreme audit institutions and civil society organizations in their roles of checking how government programs, activities are implemented. So supreme audit institutions, basically, they have a mandate to conduct these type of audits, these type of activities, making sure that they can see how budget is spent, programs are implemented, and they have specific tools to do that. Do you have an idea of one of the tools that they use to do that? One of the tools that they use to do that is audit. So they conduct audits. And what do we mean by audits? Basically, when you audit, you check. It's a check or comparison between what was planned and what was actually implemented. So when you do that, you do an audit, and we won't get into the technicalities of like the different stages of the process that you need to plan your audit, you need to execute, you need to report, you need to have a specific set of what we call criteria because it has to be an objective assessment. But basically, you need to be able to carry those audits. And technically speaking, we have three types of audits that are recognized by the standards. We have what we call financial audits, and financial audit is related to an opinion on the financial statement. So remember, when we talked about the whole public financial management cycle, we had the planning and budgeting, we had the execution, but then all of this has to be consolidated into documents that we call financial statements. And government is producing financial statements where you have a recollection of all the events which happened. And there are some principles against which those financial statements should be prepared. And a financial audit is an opinion on the financial statements, whether those financial statements respect certain attributes in terms of presentation, in terms of exhaustivity, some of these elements. And that gives you an indication on whether or not the information that is presented is accurate. So that's what you get from the financial statement. And that's what you get from financial audits. This is one of the type of audits that supreme audit institutions can do. The other type of audit is what we call compliance audits. Basically, we have laws and regulations, and those laws and regulations have stipulations, and you have to respect those stipulations. And basically, a compliance audit is to check whether or not the activities that have been implemented respect the stipulations of the law and regulations of the country. One example, procurement. Are we all aware of procurement laws or procurement regulations? How the government or how the state should be able to source and procure services. A check of those compliance law and the compliance with the procurement law is a compliance audit, mainly, generally. You can have different types of audit, but at this stage, you can do a compliance audit, making sure that there is compliance with laws and regulations. And that's also a type of audit that is very common and that is performed by supreme audit institutions. And then you have the other type of audit that is recognized by the standards, which is the performance audits. Performance audits, I really like them because to me, they're the most meaningful, but I'm a bit biased because that's more the background that I'm coming from. But at the end of the day, we are moving towards a results base or making sure that we're meeting the objectives. And a performance audit, in addition to seeing, okay, how the information is presented, is it according to the plan? Have we respected all the laws and regulation? We also have to check, have we reached the targets or the objectives that we initially set? If we decided to, within the health sector, to reach specific objectives or targets, have we reached it? That's what we want to do when we call effectiveness, which is one of the attributes of the performance audit of one of the elements that we're going to check. Then we will have to check if we did it um, with due regards to resources or if we've been efficient. But if we think about performance audit, it's really looking at whether or not we've been able to achieve some of these objectives. In a situation where a compliance audit is not adhered to, what will be the remedy? Now we're getting into very interesting questions, and we're even advancing, and I think that's quite important because um, now I'm just speaking like from a very, I would say, high level perspective. But the question that John is asking brings into like the idea of models. And we will see how the different models of external oversight also come into play. So we'll get there, John. Just be patient. But that's a very good question, and I think it's a nice segue into the question that we always ask auditors. Okay, you come up with your reports, and then what? So we will get there. So now that we've established that the SCIs can do these different types of audit, you also have other SCIs who have additional functions. And then we will build on John's point to introduce another aspect of the mandate that some SCIs have. And those SCIs, we generally find them in French-speaking countries, and they are also established as courts, where they have this ability of applying sanctions or taking decisions based on the results of the audits. So in those institutions, you have two branches. You have one branch which is dealing with the audit side, according to the different audits that we've mentioned, compliance, financials, and performance. And you have another branch who is dealing with the results of those audits. So, building on John's point, in case of non-compliance, what type of decision can we take? Can we impose financial sanctions? Can we impose disciplinary sanctions? It can even go to a point where it can go to criminal case. So then you get into a place where you have specific audit institutions which have in their mandate those two aspects, the audit powers, but also the enforcement powers. And that's generally what we find into courts that are established as tribunal. But I will come back to that because I think it's quite important, and I would also like to get your perspective on how you see this, because now you can see that we have two models of external audit which emerge. One that is basically doing the audits and reporting, and then giving the information to specific stakeholders. And then you also have a model which audits, but can also act upon some of the findings to take decisions on them. And that's generally what we have in what we call courts. And you have hybrid models, but we will definitely not get into that. We'll establish more as boards, but that's more into governance structure than anything else. But discussing or maybe reflecting on this, and I would like to take note of John's question and get your perspective on it. Do you think it's a good aspect for audit institutions to also be able to impose sanctions? That's the first part of the question. And the second part is, do you think it comes with certain risks if the same institutions is auditing and also providing the also sanctioning or taking disciplinary actions or even criminal actions based on the results of the audits? Just a few reactions. So do we have colleagues from Ghana here?
Indeed, we have colleagues from Ghana, but not as participants in the program, but facilitators at the
Okay.
moment. Who is
Okay.
on now?
From Ghana, Adams.
Melissa. Okay, good.
I don't know if they are on the call, but there are some participants of the calls who are from Ghana.
No, I'm
Okay.
talking to at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, I am from Ghana.
Okay.
Also from Ghana.
Okay.
I'm from Ghana.
Excellent. Very good.
But unfortunately, I am not in the CSO space. I'm rather an IT consultant in the PFM space.
Okay, excellent. Okay, excellent. That was just to both questions are somehow intertwined. I think, yes, the audit institutions must be capacitated to impose action for any risk. Of course, the risk may be high. Why do I ask that question? And Jeff can also speak to this. Traditionally, we saw that institutions which were focusing on just audit and follow up, according to what Jeff mentioned as the Westminster part, were operating in a prescribed space where the findings were sent to the Public Accounts Committee, and it was like a circular argument. And then you also had institutions like courts, tribunal in the most French-speaking system, where you had the possibility to impose sanctions. What we have seen over the years is that several sides from the Westminster are actually acquiring what we call surcharge powers, the ability to impose sanctions. And I specifically asked if we had colleagues from Ghana on the call because Ghana is one of the SAI who has evolved and developed that aspect, which has led to some specific situation that we might not discuss here. And also an SCI like South Africa is an SCI which has developed those type of powers. So it's just to show that there's that morphing within the Supreme Audit institutions, a movement towards allowing the institutions to follow up on its findings. Yes, Jeff, please.
Well, Freddie, you invited me to comment, so I want to support what you're saying. Maybe just provide a bit of perspective. So first of all, just going back to the sort of Westminster parliamentary system, as you know, Freddie, I'm from Canada, and we basically have the same model as of course, as the British have. And so for us in our country, where most of the audit reports are performance audit reports and not compliance audit reports, the issue of surcharge has never come up. And partly that's because the internal audit structures within our countries are very strong, and so compliance is handled internally by the government. They've got the systems in place to make sure that there is compliance. Very rarely there are issues that come up, but really the on performance audit, the committee, the ability of the committee to publicize the issues and to essentially embarrass the government into making changes, not humiliate, but embarrass, is enough. You're absolutely right that in countries, in many African countries, when I started working in this area in 2007, there was a dissatisfaction with the system not being able to that in the Anglophone African countries, all the audit office could do is report to Parliament, and there was no sanctions available. And I think on the compliance issues that tend to recur year after year, that was an area that was of concern. And I think that seems to me to be why the surcharge power came to be in countries like Ghana. So yeah, I just wanted to add my 2 cents in on that.
Absolutely. And I think it makes total sense as a way of strengthening the overall ecosystem and making sure that we achieve the objectives. But then this really allows me to pivot. We're talking about sanctions. We're talking about you referred to. I remember when I was discussing with the colleagues at the CF, they talked about this blame and shame. That like bringing the reports out act as like, and we're talking about some sort of social sanctions. And can we consider that collaboration between supreme audit institutions and civil society organization can also be a way of pressurizing the government? And in which aspects? And enhance accountability. And I think that's where we have to establish the connection between these two actors. Because remember, I first spoke about the process, and now I speak about the actors. I emphasized a lot on the role of audit institutions, but you also have other actors who can provide oversight. And when we think about accountability ecosystem, we have a directional definition of accountability. We have horizontal actors where you have parliament, supreme audit institutions, but you also have diagonal actors where you basically put in non-state actors like civil society organizations and media. And within the area of work that I'm leading in the In-Society Development Initiative, we really want to stress the collaboration between supreme audit institution and civil society organization as a way to enhance oversight and strengthen transparency. But I think that's a proposition that we can all agree on. But then for that collaboration to be effective, there needs to be some prerequisites and there needs to be some key elements and key aspects that are embedded in that collaboration. I would like to get your perspective on what could be some of the preconditions, and then I will share some examples with you or some stories. What could be, in your own capacity, would you be interested in collaborating more with the Supreme Audit institutions? Maybe you're already doing it. And what have been some of the key conditions to make that collaboration effective? Or do you think about some of those? And then I'll share some stories that we've had over the years.
And Freddie, while the participants are thinking about the answer, I'll just say that when I started working in this area in 2007, we started doing at CAF, we started doing stakeholder relation courses with the audit offices. And it was really amazing how closed they were at the time. Very much more like an academic institution, much more ivory tower. Not, you know, their idea of stakeholder relations was printing brochures and going to stakeholders and telling them about the fact that they print reports. And now it seems like in 2024, the participatory aspect of audit has taken off. That there is room for civil society organizations to actually participate in the audit process in different ways, which is a really significant advancement over the last 15 years, which has nothing to do with me, by the way. but it's, you know, so I think that's Freddie's question is, do you, you know, all these audit reports are being presented in your countries. Do you see an opportunity to contribute to those reports, to help or to provide your expertise to the audit offices so that their reports are a little bit more rich and grounded in the perspective of CSOs? I think that was your question, if I'm not mistaken, Freddie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Marilyn? Okay, I'll share. Sorry, because I could see that. Okay, yes, because
that could be a great breakup group question as well, Freddie, for our breakout group coming.
Yeah,
up.
I think we can definitely build on that, because I wanted to sort of reflect a bit on the journey that, I mean, it's my personal journey, but it's also IDI's journey on how we ended up in developing this area of work. thinking that, yes, collaboration between SCIs and civil society organization is something that is quite important, that we should encourage, and that would happen naturally. So I will bring you with me on a trip to a very small island in the Pacific, which is called Solomon Island. And 2.5 years ago, we had a partnership with Transparency International, and we decided, let's produce a guide and a document to really focus on the collaboration between supreme audit institutions and civil society organizations. And then the Auditor General of the Solomon Island, which is a good friend of mine, reached out and said, I heard that you're developing this guide. Please, I want to use it in my country to engage with the CSOs. We're like, okay, wow, that's going to be a very interesting way of testing this material. So we send a guide and we develop some slides, and exactly. We developed some slides, and that was the starting point. We're like, yes. Even recorded some video because it was not possible to travel to Solomon just for the workshop. And the CSOs listened. The CSOs listened, and they had some very thought-provoking questions afterwards. They were like, you, Mr. the Auditor General, and Intosai, and whoever you are, you want us to work with you, but we don't even understand what you do. We don't even know what's in there for us. Like, before establishing this collaboration, there needs to be some work and some elements that have to be put in place. And for us, it was really an eye-opener, like, yes, and that's why I was asking that question, like, do you think about some of the preconditions? One of the preconditions, in our opinion, and what we've been trying to building in our intervention, is how can we build trust between the actors? Because let's be honest, I told you I'm from Cameroon. In a lot of places at times, there's an assumption that organizations have a political agenda. So are we all working to make sure that we promote transparency and accountability? How can we build trust and make sure that we are all on the same page? How can we make sure that we understand each other's processes and mandate? And that's what we call PFM literacy. And I think the Ecourse that is happening at the moment is really something that is conducive in helping, because we need to understand the playing field. We need to level the playing field. We need to make sure that we leverage on each other's strength. And those are some of the key elements that needs to be in place when we want to strengthen that collaboration. Otherwise, we might end up in situations of conflict. We might end up in situations where we lack coordination. We might end up in situations that are very challenging. So collaboration between SAIs and civil society organization is paramount, but it needs to be enabled by building this trust, making sure that we understand each other's mandates, and then focusing on tangible outputs and results. And that's where I think we can use the audit cycle as a way to position that collaboration. Are we collaborating on the selection of audit processes and on audit topics? And now we want to have an SAI that is responsive to CSOs and citizen priorities and need, and make sure that it's relevant. Are we engaging in the context of the audit itself, making sure that we're also sourcing evidence from the right actors? And then we can have that citizen participation in the audit process. Are we doing the work together on reporting? One element that we're working in different jurisdictions, I think you will all agree with me, and Jeff, you can speak to it as well. There has been a lot of efforts that have been made in making the audit reports accessible, but in the views of a lot of, it's still jargon heavy. So we've seen that a very important trend of thought is to for SIs and CSOs to work together on how to simplify audit reports. Sometimes it's even using infographics. Sometimes it's turning it into cartoonish. Sometimes it's working it into local languages to make sure that this can be understood and this can be used and promoted, because you have to look at the audit or the audit report as an input to your process. How can you use that then to amplify things? So then that's also a way where you can. And the last part, most of the audits that are carried out have recommendations, and those recommendations need to be implemented. And there we also see scope for collaboration in the follow-up of audit recommendation. So leveling the playing field, building trust, and positioning the collaboration where it should be. So I think those are some of the thoughts that come to our mind when we're trying to strengthen the collaboration and the coordination between these two sets of actors. And then you can think that can be applied to every topic. And I see that there's also the need or the idea to build on gender audits. That can also be done through those gender audits. That can be used. That can be a way of testing this collaboration and making sure that we strengthen this ex post oversight. So those are some of the ideas that I just wanted to share with you to see if it resonates and just some perspective on why external audit is important, who are the actors, and how can the collaboration between SAIs and CSOs can be conducive, because we always have to keep that big picture in mind. We're not just doing things to tick a box. What is the end result? And how can we work collectively to make sure that we achieve these, I would say, societal objectives? So I think I'll probably stop there and see if there's any reaction. And Jeff, happy to contribute further if needed. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Freddie. Et ça semble que la traduction ne marche plus. Ça, c'est pas bon. S'il vous plaît, indiquez si ça commence à marcher encore. I think we're going to go to our breakout groups to continue this conversation. And maybe we can come back a little bit later and talk a bit more about the gender auditing. I have some resources I can share with you as well, or share with the group on that. Adams, did you want to kick off our first breakout group? Thanks a lot, by the way, Freddie. This was a great presentation, very systematic, well thought out, and obviously very experienced in terms of audience interaction, which is amazing. Adams, do you want to kick off the first breakout group? And Freddie,
Yes.
maybe you can join the French group so
sure.
that you can have a chat with them. Maybe we'll have two small groups in English and one group in French. Donc, dans une minute, on va avoir des discussions en groupe et Freddie va rejoindre le groupe en français. So let's, Adams, do you want to kick that off really quickly?
Yeah. Those of us on the English side, let's go to the breakout room, please.
I think we're going to have two breakout groups in English and one in French. So
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the question will be, I think the question, unless Adams, you have a question in mind, I think it's really a discussion
Yes.
about how civil, would you like to see your CSO involved in supporting the audit process, and how can that happen? How can that be achieved?
Exactly. Yes, I phrase it as I can see CSOs and SAIs collaborate in their respective countries to improve ex-post oversight. And then the details of how to make it work, we can deliberate on that more.
Perfect.
the subgroup. Yes. The group deliberated on the question and had some agreement around what is possible and what the constraints or challenges could be in terms of improving collaboration between CSOs and SAI in ex-post oversight. In general, there is willingness and openness among CSOs in our respective country from Sierra Leone, Kenya, and Ghana. That's a very exciting subject to contemplate. The openness is there, but there is also this question of the level of political environment to allow that. Especially that we all appreciate that SAIs are technically employees of Parliament. Their reports go to Parliament. How willing will the executive side see closer collaboration of SAI with CSOs? That said, Kenya has an example that I think that can be built upon, that we can leverage or be inspired by, that there is a Citizens Accountability Audit Framework, which is proposed by the Audit Service of Kenya. The information, however, is that they don't know how up-to-date this framework is, but that is an entry point. We agree that if we have such frameworks in the SAIs of our respective countries, it is an entry point. First, let's approach it with the things that are easy to understand and also government can appreciate. That is namely an opportunity for CSOs to understand even their audit report, which no government will oppose. And then building on that, improve the literacy of CSO participants about public financial management. And then those questions can then be asked or requested of what are the priority areas to improve audit implementation gaps that exist. So by way of feedback, this was the feedback from our group. And I shared also the case of Ghana where the audit service has in the past engaged media as part of its approach to informing them their work so that they can also popularize the reports that come out. Thank you very much. I hope I've represented our discussions comprehensively. Yes, Freddie, I think let's hear from your group.
That's excellent. You'll hear from my group. I just have a quick reaction to what you mentioned, and then I'll share as well what we did in the French-speaking group.
Sure.
Actually, this citizen accountability audit framework that has been developed in Kenya is the framework that we have used in one of our recent projects in Zambia and Malawi. And we had an expert from TI Kenya and also from the Auditor General's office who came to train the teams from audit officers and CSOs in Zambia and Malawi to develop a similar approach. So I think just speaking to the point that you made, Adams, there's really potential in utilizing that and implementing that in our different jurisdictions. And this is something that we'll discuss with Jeff when we could see how this could be done. And it includes a level as well of financial literacy. Going back now to the group that we had, I had the pleasure to be with colleagues from Benin and Ivory Coast. We see that there's already collaboration happening. For example, in Ivory Coast, there's a specific CSO who is always utilizing the public report, the annual public report, and disseminating it. So as soon as the public report is out, then the CSO takes that public report and disseminates it, and also organize an annual event, which is like an annual accountability forum, which is also dedicated to that specific aspect. In Benin, there are already conversations around how this collaboration could take place, but this is dependent on the SAI making the information available. So there's a bit of a backlog in making the public report public. So I think as of now, it's only the 2020 report that is online. And the intention is to see how once the other reports are available, that can be the basis of further engagement. But definitely we also see some potential. And similarly, like something that could be expanded. Over to you.
What
Yeah,
about
and
Samuel's group?
citizens. Jeff, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, what about Samuel's group? Samuel, do you want to talk a little bit about what was talked about in your group?
Yeah, hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes. With our group, we discussed much about how the trade society of our system, where the private and public partnership have to collaborate effectively to make sure that they work hand in hand. So when you look at, they will use Ghana as a case study where there are certain CSOs that churn out certain kind of specific information that always help hold government accountable. For instance, we have something called the RTI, that's Right to Information Law. There are instances that people lack information, people doesn't have access to information as to how they can approach certain issues when it's related to public financial management. So we have Media Foundation, we have the likes of CB Ghana that are also into the CSO space. They send out information, research information, and others. That helps people to have a lot of information to help them take an informed decision when it comes to passing financial issues, when it comes to our parliamentary work. So when you also move from there, one of our members also raised a concern about how the local government system works in Ghana, where there are two systems that they always have to convene from the local government system. We have the central government and the local government, where the local government is like governance to the people. It touches base with the grassroots, and then the revenues and then the kind of finances that that at that level raises must be known to the public, and that must be collaborated with the CSOs. So these were some of the few things. But upon everything, we need capacity building. Because when people are not well equipped, when people are not well exposed with how the system works, it is likely that we are not going to expect the kind of productivity that we are expecting, because people don't have access to information. People are not well informed. So it becomes a big challenge. But when we collaborate together as a team, both CSOs and then government, I think it is a teamwork that people can really consolidate to make sure that
Samuel, if I could follow closely to as whether your group you did contemplate, especially citing the case of Ghana, the recurrent issues year out that are not being addressed. Can that be an entry point to have a conversation? How can CSOs collaborate and help with tracking implementation of recommendations?
Please come again.
We have a coalition of CSOs around audit recommendation implementation.
Yeah.
Both government and then audit service will be happy that we are complementing their efforts. Do you think that is something you can work around and therefore create a mechanism to engage with the SAA in Ghana?
The network is very bad. Please, can you come again?
Okay, I'm saying that year in, year out, there are reports of similar issues reported in audit reports.
Yes.
Both government, parliament, and therefore the audit services will be frustrated. Isn't that an opportunity to work with and engage the Supreme Auditor to create a joint tracking on how these are being addressed?
Yeah. Yes, it's an entry point, but the kind of bureaucracy and the kind of hindrances that we encounter here is that there are specific institutions that are mandated for certain things to be done. So when it is not within your mandate for us to push certain agenda, the institutions that are responsible will make sure that they frustrate the system and the bureaucracies and bottlenecks that are involved it will even let you not succeed in whatever kind of agenda you are pushing. I remember at the first point when they introduced the RTI bill, there were certain CSOs that pushed like 5 to 6 key critical issues that was an important matter in the country. But out of the 8, they only succeeded in 1. The rest of them were not able to see the day of life. But with what you have raised, I'm sure it will be very important for the audit service, for the parliamentary networks, and the government to collaborate. It will be an entry point, and I think it is a step in the right direction that we can all put our heads together to make things work out.
I think let's have one of these as a pet project in our next breakout session to see how we take the conversation further. I'll come back. Then let's have Freddie, and then we move to the next phase of the presentation.
Maybe just some reflections, because I think that's quite insightful, and we see that there's a huge potential for collaboration and some very good entry points. On one hand, the idea of having more like overarching framework around which specific aspects could be articulated, but also we see that in the respective countries we have different entry points. So I think that really gives the basis for strong collaboration. And from my experience, what is quite important is to focus on the quick wins. Sometimes we really want to focus on something that is very ambitious, but not sometimes. I think it's much better to focus on the quick wins and really build it brick by brick. So then we can have something to show for, and that could be also expanded to a broader network of civil society organization. So maybe I'll get back to Jeff, because I think regarding the flow of the session and maybe sharing some resources that you were referring to on gender audits as well.
Sure thing, and I think we're going to have another round of breakout groups in a moment, a much more broad topic that Adams will introduce. I do want to mention, yes, we did have every module has a gender auditing component to it. This diagram here is from a publication that I co-wrote on the role of parliaments in gender responsive budgeting. As you can see, there are opportunities for audit offices, and I think we did have the Ghana an example from the Ghana Audit Service in as an example and an exercise in the module this week for module 4. But we talked about different ways that audit offices can look at audit look at gender, use gender, a gender lens in their audits, going from no focus at all to an exclusive focus on gender. And so just something to keep in mind for those of you that are interested in collaborating with audit offices. For example, the Ghana Audit Service, my understanding is that they have one of the areas of inquiry in their audits. They have, several sort of key areas that they plan to focus on for every audit, and one of them is generally focused on an issue related to gender and gender equality. That's all I wanted to add on the gender side. I think we should also make sure that we do talk about the parliamentary angle. I think we spent more time on the audit side today, which is fine, but we should talk about the parliamentary angle too, because the public accounts committees are obviously responsible for looking at audit reports. What are the opportunities to collaborate with Parliament, for example?
Yeah, I think I saw the point. I just looked at the chat and that I saw it there. And I think it's quite important to also look at that angle, and specifically building on some of the points that were made in the summary of the group discussion. I think the first group where Adams reported back, there was that assumption that SCIs were working for parliaments or were sort of agents of parliament, which is in the Westminster landscape sometimes how they are defined as officer of parliament. So ultimately, the interaction should also be with parliament. So how can we think about ways through which CSOs could interact more effectively with parliament and with PACs and the specific bodies who are in charge of overseeing the audit institutions and utilizing the audit reports? Without going back into like political science and like all of these, whether we think about parliaments or CSOs, they're in a way representing the people. So how can we think about voicing some of the concerns coming from the people to parliament to make sure that this is well accommodated, those messages are heard? Like, I'm just coming back from Nigeria. I think not just, I was in Nigeria because they have what they call accountability summit, national accountability summits, where they bring together more than 200 CSOs. It's a 2 or 3 days event, and we also try to discuss the political accountability and agenda there. And one of the key themes that keeps coming back is how should we connect more CSOs to parliament? Also through submissions that would come directly from the people, and that could be elevated to parliament through those public accounts committees, the role that CSOs and the information that CSOs can provide in the follow-up of audits that we've seen as something that is quite insightful. We've seen in specific jurisdictions the ability to also conduct social audits by CSOs and citizens. And then those social audits could also be communicated to Parliament and also supporting Parliament in its role of holding governments to account. So we see that there's this natural line of communication that should be established, and making sure as well that government officials, whether it's permanent secretaries, are really held accountable through the right ways. So we think when it comes to collaboration, can it be formalized? Which type of forms can it take? That depends on the country context, but we do think that there is a need to do some mapping and identify some entry points that could be conducive. But I would be very happy to hear as well if this is something that is already happening, or is this something that, because of the political landscape, is maybe too sensitive to touch? Because I've seen that it really varies from one jurisdiction to another. Jeff, I don't know if it's just me, but you seem to be. Adams?
Yes, I could hear you very well.
Okay, this is, I think I lost Jeff, but yeah, so.
I think that we are going straight into the next discussion about gender audits.
Okay, yeah, maybe, yes, probably that's like the next breakout.
But we have the next 30 minutes for the session to close. So if we can have about 10 or so minutes on gender audits and the opportunities they offer for collaboration with CSOs, and also making use of them with Parliament to advance gender budgeting and also expose oversight.
I think Jeff is here.
Jeff back?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hi,
I've
Jeff.
just come in on my phone because of some technical issues. So I've just come back on my phone.
Okay.
You go
Yes.
ahead though. I heard what you said. You take the help. That's fine.
Okay. Go ahead, Freddie. Let's talk about the gender audits, the opportunities they offer, and how we can leverage that to advance gender budgeting, but equally to push the envelope on ex post oversight?
I think Jeff position how the different different approaches to gender auditing, how we can mainstream it. But Mia would like to take the angle of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and how through this whole of government and sometimes whole of society approach, we have been able or try to bring forward the idea of gender mainstreaming. Gender mainstreaming, not by just focusing on gender as itself, but seeing that gender is actually part of each of the 60. And that if we want to be able to make sure that we measure or that we achieve the targets, we have to also collect gender disaggregated data. Because if we want to look at the effectiveness of the response that we will bring, we have to make sure that we start to bring that gender lens from the planning to the reporting. And that's really a complete shift of the mindset and the approach through which we can look at some of those issues. Because you might think, let's take focusing on education, for example. But if you really want to see how it is mainstream through education, you have to look at the numbers. You have to make sure that you collect numbers in a gender disaggregated way. And CSOs, SAIs can work together on that aspect to make sure that we have the proper lens. One other element that is quite important in our estimation, and I don't know, Jeff, how much we get into gender diversity and inclusion, is also to make sure that we touch upon these different concepts in our context. Still going back to where I'm coming from, the inclusion dimension is quite important to make sure that no one is also left behind. And that's also a way of making sure that public policies are actually satisfying and meeting the needs of even the remotest people, even those who have no access. Those are sort of off the grid. And in that sense, we do see the power of collaboration between SAIs and CSOs to make sure that through the planning, through the implementation, and through the different aspects, we're actually touching the right issues. So from our perspective, if the findings from the report are properly used, it can then inform the other steps of the cycle. And that's when we were going back to this idea of having a gender responsive budgeting. And I think we really have to contextualize the concept. And that's why from IDI perspective, we also expanded to the concept of being inclusive and what inclusivity means in a multifaceted society. And then that's also what we can recommend as part of this.
Yes, sir. Go ahead,
Yes. Okay. Thanks, everyone. I must say that we're few in our group, only two of us, myself and Angela. John wasn't able, he was having network issues. But we were able to discuss the two topics. Angela, if you can give the first feedback, and then I'll come on the gender.
Yeah, so for us, we agreed, we came into a consensus that whatever we are doing here is something that organizations, CSOs can come together and come up, work together in a project on the same. And so, and it came out, it was clear that some of us are doing some projects or are implementing projects around some of the aspects that we're dealing with in this. And so, for instance, we have organizations that are already working on the budget process, and following it up, uh, sensitizing citizens on how to go about it and mobilizing them on how to do it properly. And then we realized, of course, there are others who they engage with parliament probably, and then there are others who engage with audit institutions. So the reason we felt it would be important to have people come together, organizations come together, is to leverage on every strength, because every organization has their own strengths. They have their strengths. If it's citizen mobilization, it is the analysis of the budget, even the training of the budget champions. And so, so it would be great to just see people coming together, everyone bringing in what they are good at, and just, doing it as a team. It would really just get some impact, and it would help now close that loop, because there's this person who is doing A and someone else is doing B. So if, for example, people are dealing with parliament and probably they're not getting the impact. So how do we ensure that we are able to close that loop, that yes, we do our budget process, and then our audit institution do their work, and then parliament is also, able to do their work, then that responds to the needs of the citizens. So basically, that is how we agreed that it is important, that it should be good that CSOs would just come together and work together as this as a project. Maybe if I've left something out, my colleague can fill it up. Thank you.
No, I think it's comprehensive. You have talked on the fact that the entry point is that you are already working on the budget and with Parliament. So that can be the entry point to mobilize like-minded CSOs that can collaborate to see how you initiate a project that you can work together on, identifying common goals, but also the challenge of how you mobilize yourself to be able to engage with the SAI. But you are proposing that Parliament is an entry point for it, because that is where you are working with. So I got that clear. If I can come on the gender audit, we kind of agreed with what Freddie had presented just before the breakout, that a common entry point is to work through the SDGs, because almost every country has gender commitments that are in the SDGs. And if we approach it that way, there will be uniformity of what to even look for. And therefore, from the planning to execution of the budget, if those planning look at the SDG commitments, and at the execution, if the same approach, then the reporting can reflect same. And therefore, with that, gender audit reports can be more meaningful and helpful to tracking ex-post oversight. So basically, that was the discussion we had on this subtopic of gender audits and then ex-post. Thank you. Can we get it back to Freddie and then the other groups, please?
Oh, yes, thank you. I think ours was pretty straightforward. We mainly focused because in our past conversation we discussed a bit the collaboration with also Parliament. That is definitely something that should be encouraged, but at the moment there are no clear entry points. That's in the two jurisdictions that we're working on. Something that should be looked at. Regarding gender, what we see is that there's really, I would say, a lot of opportunities because at the moment, not much is happening. And the impression is that the audit reports are not really focusing on that and cannot help CSOs to really also assess those commitments. So one way would be also for CSOs to encourage SAIs to assess government's commitment at the moment through audits. And then CSOs could also take up on the role of following up on the findings and maybe making some advocacy around it. And obviously positioning it in the context of the SDGs. but also maybe national development plans, which sometimes are aligned with the SDGs. So that is a bit what was discussed in our group. Over to you.
Well, I think, Stephen, was there a third group? Was there feedback? Hello? Okay, I guess we're only two groups at this point. I think by the agenda is to have some feedback and wrap up from Jeff. Is Jeff
Okay,
with
well,
us?
first of all, thank you very much, Freddie, for being our guest today. It was great to have you. Your experience is just amazing. You've got so much perspective to share, and you're doing so much amazing work on this, and on audit and CSO involvement. And like I said, I think the landscape has really changed over the last 15 years as SAIs are becoming more participatory. So as we move forward in the next couple of weeks, we're going to start talking to the participants about where they would like to channel their efforts in collaboration, whether it be at the ex ante phase of the budget process, or whether they will focus more on the ex post phase of the budget process. So we hope that there'll be some interest in exploring future ways to collaborate with Supreme Audit institutions. I think just to say very quickly that next week we're going to be focusing. I think we had some network issues today, and that's why we've lost a lot of our participants. But we do record the program or the Zoom meeting, and if PN Africa can ensure that we get this up on the Ecourse platform, get all the Zoom calls, all the Zoom live sessions on the platform, that would be great, so that we can make sure that everybody who didn't get to see it gets a chance to see it. Next week, we're going to be talking about oversight of public debt and debt crisis in Africa, and some opportunities for involvement to support, for CSOs to support the advocacy role and the oversight role around public debt. So I'm really looking forward to that session. And I think also just to say that in going forward, also we're getting closer to the ends of the e-course. In 2 weeks, we'll be having a session that will talk more about what can you do as CSOs to be actively involved in one of the phases of the budget process. So I'm very much looking forward to that as well. And somebody's rooster is crowing in the background there, which is great. That's all from my side. Adams, did you have anything to add before we wrap up?
Yes, what I would say is that the discussion we had on what CSOs can initiate by way of project should be continued at the country level, especially the Kenya. I agree with the fact that Parliament is an entry point. We already have CSOs that are working on that. Come together and see how you can work to identify a common approach, but also the issues that are, as Freddie put it, low-hanging fruits, quick wins. You don't want to rock the boat with the institutions before you even get started. That's my feedback, Jeff. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Well, the rooster is crowing in the background there, so that's a good sign.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful, very authentic sound. I love it. Freddie, any last words before we wrap up?
Oh no, just thank you. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed spending some time with you guys. Really like it. And as I put in the chat, really happy to connect with you further. And I left my contact. So really happy and hope you liked it, because me, I really enjoyed it, and yeah, available if needed again. So thank you very much.
Fantastic, Freddie. Thank you. Any last comments or questions from our participants? We have about 3 minutes. So if there's an issue, oh, John.
Hello.
Yes, John.
Yeah, since we missed out because of network problem, and I want us to really gain the last part of this discussion, I'll be grateful if maybe you can summarize and send it in the chat or in the email box so that we can just get 1 or 2 issues out of it.
I think the best thing to do is we can send you, because I think the best thing we can do is send you the recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll be fine. That'll be fine.
Yeah, I'll when I get the link from PN Africa, I'll send it by email, but I'll also ask them to post it in the in the e-course.
Great.
We don't want to miss next week. It's going to be a great, not you personally, John. I know that you participated as much as you could based on network issues, but in general, don't want to miss next week, folks. We have a great session coming up on oversight of public debt. So I think we'll wrap up. Thank you so much again, and we'll see you next week for live session 5. Have a good weekend and take care.